Coming up on Unpacked.
I ended up subconsciously having a prayer that, you know what, God, I wish my mother could die.
Was your mom always open with you about your father from as long as you can remember?
She used to remind me how she wanted to abort me.
The reason I failed to answer you when you ask who your father is, it is because I was raped and you were conceived.
In a country like South Africa, rape is rife. We all read about it or we know somebody who has been raped if we ourselves have not been the victims. But it's not often that the products of rape are spoken about. Our guests joining us today are here to unpack their stories. A common thread that starts at birth. Today's guests were both conceived through rape. Nikita Peters's upbringing was not all that rosy. She was raised by a single mother who battled alcoholism. She was taken into the child welfare system, which saw Nikita moving from one orphanage to another. Her mother eventually passed away when she was 17 years old. Sicelo Mncube was born in Ntuzuma, KZN, and also raised by a single mother. In 2006, his mother passed away, and this saw him stranded and living on the streets while trying to find his way as an orphan. Sicelo found a letter his mom had written that detailed his conception. These are their stories. Let's unpack. Joining us via VideoCon are our guest, Sicelo. Hi, Sicelo. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Sissy?
I am good, thank you. And also joining us is Nikita. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, Sicelo, let me get started with you. Let's go back to what your upbringing and childhood was like.
Okay. Firstly, let me just take this opportunity and greet South Africans at homes or wherever they are watching. Growing up, I come from a very broken background. I always tell people that I was not poor, but I was the poor of the poorest, to a point that a poor person, when they compare themselves to me, they will see themselves as better or poor in a better manner compared to my situation. So it was a difficult situation growing up, raised by a single parent with siblings, just like any child who grows up in a township, if I put it that way. So my situation was difficult to a point that I noticed at my early age that my mother was a bitter woman, if I can put it that way. But I couldn't ask questions because in a black society, it is wrong for a child to ask his or her elders questions. You only have to take rules, follow rules, but no questions. You have to go. You have to live your life according to the rules that have been put. So
just to ask, just to come in there, you say you noticed she was a bitter person. What specifically did you see that you describe as being bitter?
Okay, I'm the firstborn on my mother's womb. I'm the firstborn, and I've got my sister who comes after me. So what I noticed was that every day I would get a beating. Every day my mother would come back at work. Surely I would get beaten sometimes for no reasons, or sometimes for smaller mistakes. Just because if you are a child, surely you are bound to make mistakes like breaking a glass. Getting home late, maybe. You know what I'm saying? So even on a small mistake, I would be beaten as if I've killed the person. So I started noticing those things to a point that, every example of being disciplined will be made out of me, for other siblings and other cousins, So that what I noticed, that no, man, this is not normal, What is that I did to this woman to get beaten like this? A punishment, because it came as a punishment to me, not as a discipline or what you call being disciplined. But I saw that as a punishment. But I couldn't have a voice by that time because, as I said, that you as a child you were not allowed to have a voice, to voice out how you feel about stuff, because You are a child.
So would you, I mean, it sounds like you had a difficult childhood with what you're dealing with your mom, and also the fact that, as you described, the poorest of the poor.
Yes, no, I don't want to lie. My background was very difficult, because my mother was a domestic worker. Sometimes there would be job opportunities. Sometimes there won't be job opportunities. She had to support family. Her sisters and all those. But now, I thought that maybe it's a burden for any single parent. To be frustrated and to take out anger to somebody else. But of the situation of my mother was different, and it's ended up opening my eyes at an early stage, because I began now to be an introvert, and I began to have conversation within myself, with myself, asking myself questions. Why is she like this? Why is she so angry? Why is she so bitter? But I couldn't give myself answers because I never understood what was going on.
And in terms of who was in the household at that time, was it just your mom?
I don't wanna lie. It was a very difficult upbringing. In my family, it was my mother, my siblings, and grandmother. So the situation was difficult for my grandmother, for my mother. So we also experienced a difficult upbringing. To a point that she had her own room aside, and she had her own difficulties without being assisted by anybody. So I think that also added up to her frustrations. And I was the only subject or an object to take out her frustrations too.
Okay, so when did things start to change? Did they ever get better?
No, things never changed. Instead, they began to get worse because, getting daily beatings, without being rescued by anybody. I ended up subconsciously having a prayer that, what, God, I wish my mother could die, because now I'm getting affected by what was affecting her. So that's what was my prayer. And I remember she started getting sick on the year 2005, around November. Unfortunately, she passed away 2006, January 16. I was 14 years old. That's where difficulties began, because it was my first time experiencing death with my mother. So that was a traumatic experience, a most painful experience. And that's where many events, painful events and sorrowful events began to take course,
So how did she pass away?
She got sick. She got sick. And if I analyze the sickness now, because I'm matured and I can say that I'm wise now, the symptoms could tell that it was HIV symptoms. But I'm not saying it was it, but the symptoms was showing that.
Yeah. So now you say that there are a series of things that happened after she passed away. What are some of those things that happened?
Some of those things were like, for an example, one, lost shelter. Two, began to live in different people's houses, strangers' houses. Three,
was that because your mom was the one that was supporting the family?
Yes, and we found out at a later stage that where we were staying, she was renting. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So now that's why we ended up. I ended up now having no place to stay, because my two sisters had their fathers. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So they stayed with their fathers, and I began to be a vagabond, staying in different houses with different people. Live from one house to another.
So I still just am challenged with understanding, was there no room for your sisters, any of the fathers or father, to take you in
for
as
me?
Well? Yes.
All right. This what happened. They were not there. They were not in the picture, of our upbringing. But my sisters used to go and visit them, But when the incident of losing shelter happened, forcefully, I had to now do some calls to report the situations. But each father came, because different fathers, So each one came and collected what belongs to him, and the other came and collected what belonged to him, and nobody came to fetch me, And then Now I had to find a way to survive, you know. So I realized, you know, that I'm becoming a street kid now. So because now I didn't know where to go, days kept on going, you know, without having shelter, you know. I kept moving around, staying at some friends' places for maybe 2 days or 3 days, and then I would change and go to another friend, you know. Then that became my normal life, you know, of being a vagabond, going left and right, up and down with no direction.
So where was your grandmother at the time?
My mother passed away in 2006. My grandmother passed away in 2007.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, and that just sounds absolutely horrific and scary. So now you were basically moving from place to place. Did this continue until you turned 18, and did you manage to finish school?
Okay. Because I don't know the sequence of the questions, but what I can say is that this thing happened up until 2008. Because I kept dropping out of school, getting back to school because of my friends. My friends will say, Stella, you need to go back to school. And then I'll drop out because I'll have to find something to eat, take care of myself, survival strategies, you know. So, and I dropped out of school. So the other year, it was 2008, I got back to school. So one educator there saw a potential in me. And then to a point that he came to me and said, Stella, you are doing good on your studies, but you don't like school. You are not attending school, and you are always absent, you know. And I've reported you to the principal of the school. So because we believe that you can be one of those students who can take our school who can be one of those students who are passing with higher marks. You know what I'm saying? So then they reported to the principal. When I was taken to the principal's office, there, you know, it was those times where corporal punishment was still allowed. So I got a beating there to a point that they realized that the way I was crying was not a usual way of feeling the pain of the strokes, you know, but it was more than that. And then they sat me down, they started asking me questions. And then that way I told them that the reason that I get absent, drop out of school, it is because I had no shelter, I had nobody, you know, so I was a vagabond. Then the principal said, what can you then bring forward that will be evident that you don't have somebody who is your guardian, because we want to take your matter to social development, you know. And then I told them that I can maybe bring forward a death certificate of my mother. So they sent me to go and collect the death certificate. So when I went there, one of my sister's places, I collected the death certificate. But the situation that happened there, when I wanted my mother's death certificate, I was given a file that had my mother's documents. So I sat down on that room, going through that file, looking for a death certificate.
Yeah.
While I was paging the file, a brown envelope fell down. When the envelope fell down, I put the file aside. And then within me, I had a conversation that I thought my mother left me with nothing, but she hid an envelope. And then I thought that it was money inside there. When I picked up the envelope, when I felt the envelope was thick, and I was convinced that there was money inside. And then my conscience said, turn the envelope and open the envelope and see what's inside. But when I turned the envelope, I came across words that changed my life.
Yeah.
Words that were saying, I was raped and you were born.
Wow. I was raped and you were born. Yeah.
Yes. You know, I don't want to lie to you. That was the most painful moment of my life, because on that moment, coming across such words, tears just dropped out and they fell down. Because I'm this person who always talked to himself, because I had nobody to talk to growing up. And then I asked myself, what does this mean? What does this mean? While I was crying like that, then the question appeared within me, Stella, why are you crying? But the answer was, I was crying because, number one, the letter was written in my mother's handwriting. Number two, I've never met the guy, you know. I've never been introduced to the guy. So I concluded that maybe this letter is directed to me or written for me, you know. And then my conscience said, open the letter and read the letter so that you can get clarity. What is this about, you know? Then when I opened the letter, I got shocked that it was not a long written letter, but it was only 4 sentences. And those sentences were reading as follows. First sentence was saying, my son, if you find this letter, it is there to give you your emotional freedom. The second sentence was saying, the reason I failed to answer you when you ask who your father is, it is because I was raped and you were conceived. The third sentence was saying, I tried to abort you on the 5th month, but I failed because I was caught trying to attempt abortion. As a result, when I gave birth to you, you never came out with your head. Instead, you came out with your feet. The third sentence was saying, the fourth sentence, was saying, the surname that you are using is not your surname. And it is not my surname as well, but my stepfather's surname, meaning that I'm 29 years old today. I'm using a surname of a man that I'm not related to or biologically connected to. That was the most painful moment of my life, finding the story of how I was conceived.
Yeah. Whew. And I think that's quite a heavy one and a heavy moment in your life. But let me jump to you, Nikita. Take me back to your upbringing and what that was like.
Hi. First, I just want to say thank you again for having me on the show. And Stella, your story is very touching. In my case, I grew up in a small town called Clearwood. It was just my brother and I. And we didn't have a home. Like, my mom lived in, those old toilets that are like those ones that doesn't flush or anything?
Yeah.
So we lived in a room like that, and my mom had to cover it up to make a room so that we could sleep. And it was just her and my brother and I. And my mom had a problem. She was an alcoholic. So like every single time she couldn't get that alcohol, I was the one that used to pay for it. I remember also her sending me to sell my clothes because she was also domestic. So if she didn't get work, I was the one that used to go out and sell my clothing to bring food onto the table. And then at school, I wouldn't go with lunch or anything. And then eventually the teachers noticed that something was wrong. And then my brother told them that my mom was abusing us. And we were transferred to the orphanage from the age of 10 till 18. But during the time I stayed with my mom, things were very hard because she would go for weeks, leaving my brother and I with no food, no water, no candle, nothing. I was the one asking people for food, going door to door, asking for candles or something for us to eat. And then some people would give us stale food that was in the fridge, and you could even see the mold. But what choice did we have? We used to just eat what we had given. And yeah, I didn't have any father figure in my life. My mom told me that he raped her at the club, and then I was conceived. And he used to come around, and I asked her, like, who is this man? Is he not my father? And then she was telling me that, no, this is the man that raped you. He is your father. But he would deny me to my face, telling me that he doesn't want anything to do with me. And I never had a relationship with this man or anything. Even my brother's father, he was never there. So it was just me being an adult before I reached puberty.
So was your mom always open with you about your father from as long as you can remember?
No. Like when she used to remind me how she wanted to abort me, can't you see that there's no food in the house? And then I have to go and sell my clothes. Or maybe she'll go for weeks, like I said, and then there was nothing for us. And then even the family members that lived close by, they weren't able to help us all the time because things were hard for them as well.
Yeah. So in the time that you didn't know that you were a product of rape, where did you believe your father was? Or who did you believe your father was?
I thought it was my brother's father because we don't have the same fathers. He used to come around often to visit my mom, but I'd call him dad and stuff. And then I realized that this man is not my father because he looks more like my brother than me. And then I asked my mom about it. I'd keep asking her, and then she's like, your father, he doesn't want you. Then eventually one day, she did tell me that she was raped, and that is how I was conceived because he raped her at the club. But he still denies me to my face, even though she told me that he is my father. So if I have to have a chance right now, I would love to do a DNA test, but I don't want to have a relationship with him. Because I keep having this question, what if he is? What if he's not? And then my kids are asking me, where's grandpa? Because they know that I have a dad, but they're not sure if he is my dad. You understand?
Yeah. I think also maybe the difficulty with a DNA test is even if it can confirm paternity, it's not going to confirm the details. It's not going to give you maybe the answers all the answers you're looking for.
Yeah, true. And then because my mom used to go all the time drinking and stuff, at the age of 8, my uncle, her brother, he raped me. And that evening, it was It was so, I can still remember every single thing that happened. So he was drunk that evening, and then my mom wasn't there. And then he came, acted as if he was happy uncle. And then came towards the evening. We didn't have a bed. I used to sleep on a couch, and then there was another sleeper couch. So we opened that sleeper couch since my mom wasn't there. And then we all slept on that sleeper couch on the floor. And then he started raping me. And then I asked him, I started crying. I said, please don't do this. And then he told me to shut up. I mustn't tell anybody. And I didn't tell anybody. Even when I went to the orphanage, I didn't report it. But then I started talking about it recently. And then I started being sidelined from my family because they don't like the fact that I'm telling the world about what happened in our family, you see.
So, I mean, I'm curious, just with regards to the family structure at this time, that you guys ended up going to an orphanage. There are many, especially African Black people who will be like, should anything happen to my brother's child, that's our child, or the community. How is it that you ended up in an orphanage where you are speaking of the fact that you had a brother who has a father, or you're speaking about the fact that they were relatives?
That is a difficult question. So, yes, we went to the orphanage, but everybody was separate. My family is not the type of family that is close. Each man is for their own personal, own business. So when we went to the orphanage, I was 10 years and he was around 5, 6, around there.
Yeah.
And then when we did get to the orphanage, nobody knew that we were there because they weren't always visiting us or finding out about us, how are we doing and stuff like that. So we got to the orphanage, and a month later, that's when I got a call from a family relative, and they came and they saw us, and they didn't know that we were in the homes. But then even so, they didn't bother to take us out of the home, you get. So we lived there, and I was moved
can I
from
just
home to
interrupt?
home.
How come? Because you guys went and told somebody, and you got removed from the house. Was it not protocol that before you get removed from the house, they look for family? Because now, if, let's say social workers are involved, why did they put you in a home before looking for your family?
Well, the family that I had, they didn't have their own home. Like, we all lived in rooms.
Yes.
So the place wasn't safe for us to go and stay with the family members at the time. So, yeah, they did. But then they could see that most of the family members that I had were all like alcoholics and stuff. And the place wasn't safe for me and my brother. So that is why they took us.
Yes. So now you go into a home and you are silent about what happened to you. At this point, your mom has already shared with you about your father. What is the next thing that happens?
So after we moved to the orphanage, like, we lived there, then we were I was being moved like from home to home for weekends. We'd get foster parents that would come and pick us up for weekends. But like, my mom she didn't visit me at the time. I don't know, maybe she was shy or she didn't have bus fare money or something like that. And then at the age of 16 in 2008, December 16, I remember visiting her in December holidays. So my mom was, like I mentioned, she wasn't working or anything. So then a family member came up to me and they asked me if I wanted Christmas clothing. And of course, which child didn't want Christmas clothing for Christmas? So then she says to me, okay, let's go. Somebody's going to give you money. Remember, this is one of my mom's siblings, right? So we're very close. So I went with this person, and then as we got closer to the destination, there was a man in the van. We were sitting in a white van, and he started smiling at me. And I was so confused. I didn't know what was going on. Remember, I just came from the holidays.
Yeah.
And then this person said to me that I should go in the car with this man, and then he's going to give me money for Christmas clothes. And I'm like, okay, let's go, both of us. And like, no, you go alone. And I trust them. So I'm like, oh, okay, then no problem. So as I'm in the car, this man started rubbing my thighs. He started touching my breasts, started telling me how beautiful I was, my body shape and everything. And I remember saying, please don't do anything. I just came to see my mother. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what you're going to do, but please take me back home. The man didn't care. He took me to a hotel, and he locked the room, and he forced me to watch porn. And then he started raping me, and he gave me 400 rand for Christmas clothes. He says, there's your Christmas clothes. And he didn't take me home. He left me there's this place called Housewife Market. It's a bit far from my home where my mom was. He left me there. I remember walking with sperms down my thighs. I was crying, literally shaking, trying to find this person that took me to this man and explain what happened to them. Because I don't know, maybe they weren't aware of what was happening.
Yeah.
So as I got there, I was told not to talk about it. I was told to keep quiet. So that person took me to their house for the rest of the holiday so that I don't talk about it to my parents or anything. And then in 2010, I then tested positive for HIV. And and that is where I contracted it from, because I went back to the orphanage. I told them, they took me for an HIV test, and I was told to come back after 3 months for a window period. But I didn't go because I was scared. And then I started having symptoms. I started getting sick. My hair was falling. And that's when I found out that I'm HIV positive. So it was very hard for me to accept my status because I just lost my mother in 2011 from the same thing. And I thought that this was what's going to happen to me. I was also going to die. And also growing up in a colored community, people would say, this one got AIDS, just sleeping around, busy with different kind of men, you know? So the stigma at the time was very scared. That is why it wasn't easy for me to accept it.
Is there, were there any feelings that you had towards the fact that now you were raped a second time and your mom was also raped?
I thought it's generational curse. Because like what happened to her is happening to me. You understand?
Yeah.
Like even like I have a child, the father is not a part of the life. And I also have my father wasn't a part of my life. So I thought maybe history is repeating itself with me. And I felt as if maybe this is the way I'm supposed to live. I was bad luck and stuff. And I remember crying so hard, praying that God changed my life. I was even so suicidal. Like I have like marks from cutting my wrist, trying to take my life, but it didn't work.
And I mean, you didn't find out in as dramatic a way as Sicelo did about, being the product of rape. How did that affect you emotionally?
I was very lonely. I tried looking for love from different men. I remember like every relationship that I was in, I would try and see a father figure in him because I didn't have that father in my life. And I dated a couple of men that would abuse me. They would hit me, and I would think that maybe this is the way it's normal. This is what love is. And because I remember my mom also being beaten by my stepdad, my brother's father. So I'm like, maybe it's normal. This is love.
Yeah.
And I remember him coming past the one time, and I was so small, and I asked him, Dad, can you please buy me chips? I remember calling him Dad. He went to the shop, but he didn't ever return. He never came back. Wow. And that was the last time I saw him.
Sicelo, I'm going to come back to you. Just in terms of, you spoke about the moment that you found out, the different things that your mom shared with you. Did you feel betrayed that she never told you while she was alive?
I was angry. I hated her, so much. When you're a child and you are being told, or you are experiencing stuff that you feel like you should have been told, maybe deal with it at an early stage, So I felt like if maybe she had told me early, I won't be feeling the way I feel with no one to make me understand, to comfort me, to feel pity for me, So then hatred started building within me, because at first I thought that, no, man, this is not true, Maybe this person knows that the person maybe that is my father. Maybe it's somebody that I would be shocked if I can be told that he is my father. So I had those many thoughts, trying to put a clear picture together on why did she fail to tell me? Why didn't she tell me? Like nobody else knows about this. How come? Because even when I found the letter, when I took the letter to sister, she teared the letter apart. She said, you are taking a fiction, you want to export it out to just a similar story like Nikita, where like the family will distance themselves, will behave as if they don't know anything, and
so did the family also know, because obviously somebody put the envelope there? Does it mean that somebody knew the truth but also didn't tell you?
All right. These are a couple of things that I want to mention. Firstly, I don't know I don't know if it was her who put the envelope in the file. Number two, when I took the envelope to my aunt, her sister, she never read it. She just, because I told her this is the letter, and I explained what it was written on the letter. Then she teared it and she called me names, and then that was the last time, 2006, I saw her up until she died, So that left me with a question mark that I can see, because now I'm old enough. I'm a reasoning person. I philosophize. I ask myself, how come that these people are related to, or are sisters, but they can't even fight her battles? Maybe they know something, that they are dying with. They don't want to expose. They don't want to tell me. So somehow, somewhere, I always say that to myself, that maybe somebody who did this is somebody closer than I think, And, I go around with that question that who is this particular person? I go around studying characters, studying structures of people, because now I've got this thing that maybe this person is closer to me. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a very unfortunate situation whereby issues of rape, being products of rape, that the family members will also add value to frustrations of the victim. You know what I'm saying? So that what happened to me as well.
So where do you find yourself today emotionally in regards to what you went through and what you discovered?
I believe that there are things that will never be. I believe that there are things that will never be fixed by people. There are things that will never be fixed by money, but there are things that will be fixed by time. You understand what I'm trying to say? So I found the letter 2006, but I began to write about it, or about my story 2018. So from 2018 up until today, I get bookings, I get invited, I get called to come and speak. The moment I speak about my story as it is, it becomes healing to me, because it no longer hurts me. It no longer causes pain to me. I've came across different people, that are willing to be father figures in my life, well-known people. I remember I had an audition on one of the national radio station on SABC. From out of 900 speakers, I only shared my story, but I became one of the top 3 best speakers in South Africa, to a point that I ended up 2019 getting an opportunity to fly to Illinois, Chicago, to have an interview with Steve Harvey to share my story. So now, the moment I speak about my story, it is where I realize that I'm not the only one. That is why when I wrote my book, I said on my book, because I've got a book titled "I Was Raped and You Were Born." I tell people that if you believe that your story is difficult and you want to hang yourself, you want to commit suicide, before you take that rope and hang yourself, can you please read about my story first? If my story is nothing compared to your story, then you can commit suicide, because I believe that because I went through hardships at an early stage of my life, when life forced me to become a man, yet I was supposed to be a boy and be a child. I don't know. I've never experienced being a child, to a point that I used to say that I don't want to rob myself, even if I'm grown up now. But I wanna do things that will make me happy, be joyful like a child, because I don't know that experience. You know what I'm saying?
And I understand, with everything that you've been through, it has brought you to a place where at least you're able to use your story and use your hardships to build a better life for yourself and to help others. Now, Nikita, from your side, where do you find yourself today?
I'm very happy at the moment. I will speak about what I went through on social media. I help a lot of people who have been through similar situations, rape, abandoned by their dads and moms, grew up in orphanages. I speak, and when I speak, I know that I'm helping somebody out there. So by me being open on social media, I'm able to heal as well.
Yeah.
So I found a partner that accepts me with my status. We have 3 kids. He's negative. And also he doesn't judge the fact that I didn't have a male figure. And I know I get angry sometimes because I wish I had what I wanted to have as a kid, but I'm grateful that I can see it through him. You understand?
What would you like to see happen to, the man that you believe to be your father, that is your mother's rapist?
I actually don't like that man. I don't like him at all. So, even if he passes away or what, I won't feel a thing.
So what would you like to happen to him?
Nothing. He can just live his life the way he's living, and I live mine. I don't want to cross paths with him. I don't want to do anything to do with him. I'm happy the way it is.
So, Stelo, in the case of yourself, where your mom left you this message, what would you like to see happen to the man that raped her, the man that you see as your father? And do you even know who he is or where he is?
All right. With the struggles of my life, I came to a point whereby I said to myself, for me to be able to move on, because I don't want to be a bitter soul. I want to be a better soul. So for me to be able to move forward as a better soul, I have to accept what I can't change and change what I can't accept. For the fact that I cannot find this person, for now, I have to accept that. When it happened, it will happen. But now,
So did you look for him?
For me, I tried several times, but I never came close to finding him, So that is where I then decided that, you know what, for you to be a better man, because you are wasting much time looking for what happened in the past, yet you are ignoring the future. So I said to myself, okay, I have to accept what I can change and change what I can't accept. That is why I even wrote the third book titled My Father Has Always Been There, I Rejected Him, where I talk about God, that I kept on looking for a father, and I'm where I am today, even internationally recognized. And then who has been so good to me so much? And I realized that, no, man, my Father in heaven has been good to me. Yet I kept on rejecting him, looking for my Father on earth. So I believe that sometimes there are things that appear as problems in our eyes, but to God they are a solution. How many people still have been able to help through his story? There are so many. So I cannot cry as if my life is not inspirational to somebody else. So I'm saying with my answer in closure that I'm no longer looking. Even if he can appear, fine, he can appear. You have to pay for whatever that happened to my mother. But to me, I'm good where I am with the people who have sacrificed their time, money, energy to add value to my life.
And thank you for that. I think that's a much better place to be in emotionally. And I'm happy that the both of you are speaking from that perspective, that you're doing something with your lives. You've moved on from this, and you are able to speak about it, because there is something that a person carries with them, whether they like it or not, when you discover the truth of what has happened to you. And I'm hoping that it doesn't affect your sense of identity negatively. Nikita and Stelo, thank you so much for joining us here on Unpacked to speak about this. And thank you for sharing so openly your stories. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us, sis.
Thank you. #Unpacked with Relebogile. These are not easy subjects to discuss. There are some individuals who are still walking around not even aware that they are a product of rape, and it makes it difficult with so many living without their fathers. I hope that if the story resonates with you, you're comfortable enough to speak about it, but that you also don't inherit the trauma that comes with it. As you've heard with the guests that we've spoken to today, it has been a difficult life for them to live outside of the truth of finding out what happened to their mothers. Even though we speak so often about rape, when you hear each and every individual story, it goes to show that there is a ripple effect. It affects so many people, not just the victim. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night. Next time on Unpacked.
It's fine if you call me a dwarf, because it's a biological term.
Yeah.
We just only have small hands and legs.
And they'll ask us, Wuti, I just want to rock you and roll you and do all those things, And you think to yourself, Puti, you know what? I'm also a human being. I'm not a rubber.
Or a toy.
Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching Unpacked with Relebogile Mamoja. Make sure you subscribe to my channel where you can get to watch more episodes. But more importantly, you can be part of our online community. Comment down below, share with us who you'd like to see on the show, what story you'd like us to discuss. We love engaging with you. Keep it coming and don't forget to subscribe.